From the first film's troubled production history to it effectively ruining James Gunn's DCU reboot, here's why The Flash 2 will never happen. Honestly, things seemed to go wrong from day one, because The Flash faced countless problems during production. I mean, they've been trying to bring the Scarlet Speedster to the big screen since the 1980s. But when Warner Bros. Started working on the DCEU, they finally got the ball rolling on a film adaptation in 2013. Ezra Miller's Flash debuted in Batman vs. Superman, which kicked off a bunch of other projects, including a solo film set for a 2018 release date. Of course, we didn't get to see the film in 2018, mostly because Warner Bros. Couldn't find anyone that wanted to work on it. Time after time, directors and writers they approached rejected their offers. They asked James Wan to pick between Flash and Aquaman, and he decided to go with Aquaman. Honestly, it was probably the right choice, because the movie ended up grossing over $1 billion worldwide. Shortly after Wan passed on the project, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller signed on to write a screenplay, with the director's seat also on the cards. Unfortunately, they passed on the offer too, opting to make a Han Solo movie for Lucasfilms instead, so the film was left directionless yet again, although Warner Bros. Still had their story to work with. Seth Grahame-Smith was next in line, with the director of Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, modifying the previous script and agreeing to direct the project as well. Fast forward to 2016, and he was out of the picture, but his successor, Rick Famuyiwa, started making progress. He went so far as to cast a few roles for the film, including Kiersey Clemons as Iris West and Billy Crudup as Barry Allen's dad, Henry. That said, he barely lasted a month before jumping ship, and at this point, Warner Bros. Started getting desperate. After all, the deadline was coming up fast, with Batman vs. Superman introducing Ezra Miller's Flash in 2016. They needed to work overtime to get the movie made, and in 2017, we saw a glimmer of hope. The studio was trying to get its hands on Robert Zemeckis, aka the guy that directed Back to the Future. While these rumors were circulating, Warner Bros. Announced that the movie would be based on Flashpoint. Given the whole time travel narrative, Zemeckis seemed like the perfect choice. But the rumors turned out to be fake in the end. Even top candidates like John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein couldn't work out, because apparently they had some major creative differences with Ezra. Warner Bros. Got so desperate that they even let Miller tack a crack at the script, pairing him with legendary comics writer Grant Morrison. But unsurprisingly, this didn't work out very well. It wasn't until 2019 that the film found a screenwriter in Christina Hodson, which is around the same time, Andy Muschietti got the director gig too. With the supposedly final 2022 release date released to the public, fans breathed a sigh of relief, but it wasn't gonna last long. You see, something sinister was brewing in Ezra Miller's personal life, and it was about to wreak havoc with the film's release. Starting in March 2022, Miller went on an unspeakable crime spree, with the first instance involving a violent encounter at a karaoke bar. In the same month, a couple filed a restraining order against the actor, and their assault charge in April didn't help matters much. Ezra was clearly going through something, but I doubt anyone expected their next major controversy. As difficult as it is to talk about, Ezra was accused of grooming two 12-year-old girls, and the second girl's parents even got a harassment protection order to keep Miller away. After years of production delays, this was the last thing Warner Bros. Needed, especially given how poorly the DCEU had been faring. Sure, Aquaman was a roaring success, and Patty Jenkins did a great job adapting Wonder Woman for the first time. Shazam was another standout film, but apart from that, the DCEU's been rather mediocre, wouldn't you agree? I mean, Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad were terrible films, and don't even get me started on Justice League. After years of build-up, the film was a major letdown, and things were only going to get worse from there. Warner Bros. Attempts to expand the franchise didn't work very well. Birds of Prey was a failure, as was the Wonder Woman sequel, so by the time Ezra's controversies came to light, the DCEU was in a state of crisis, and they just couldn't afford to dump a project they'd spent so much money on. You've got to understand, Warner Bros. Needed to release The Flash, so when Ezra posted an apology in August 2022, they decided to keep them in the lead role. Fans were understandably furious about this, but the studio's hands were tied. As tempting as it sounded, it was just too late for Warner Bros. To drop them from the project, because filming had already wrapped in late 2021. Their solution? Sticking their heads in the sand. I guess Warner Bros. Was hoping everyone would forget about Ezra's reign of terror. But in their defense, James Gunn was working on rebooting the DCU this whole time. He's being hailed as the franchise's savior, labeling The Flash as the cinematic event that had reset the timeline. That should have drummed up some buzz for the film, because after directing Guardians of the Galaxy and The Suicide Squad, he's practically royalty in the superhero world. In my view, Warner Bros. Wanted to get the movie out fast, and they couldn't wait to put it behind him. All this momentum could have made a sequel possibly, but there was a problem. The Flash is one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. Warner Bros. Is looking at $200 million loss, so unless they hate money, I'm willing to bet they'll never greenlight a sequel. On top of that, Andy Muschietti said he'd only return if he got to work with Ezra Miller again. Apparently, he loved working with the actor, and he couldn't see anyone else portray Barry Allen. But James Gunn and Warner Bros. Would only allow that on one condition: the film had to do well. It's safe to say, it failed miserably, so the original director won't be returning, and I just can't see a sequel working out without him. I mean, even Black Adam made more in its opening weekend, which is saying something, because it was part of the worst run the DCU's ever had. Even the Justice League seems like a hit in comparison. Black Adam was billed as the next big installment in the cinematic universe, but it barely even broke even. As for Shazam 2, it should have given the DCEU a much-needed win, because it was the sequel to one of a handful of good films in the franchise. But instead, it was just another disappointment. One thing's for sure, there's nothing left for Warner Bros. As far as the DCEU is concerned. The whole saga was hit or miss from the beginning. Zack Snyder tried to give us a darker take on the source material, but it just didn't resonate with audiences, and his replacement, Joss Whedon, was somehow even worse. After a string of failures, Warner Bros. Is gonna want to play it safe, so a sequel to The Flash is out of the question. Besides, James Gunn has a bold vision for the franchise, with the first chapter, Gods and Monsters, set to kick off with Superman: Legacy. He's already finished the script for the Man of Steel reboot, with Andy Muschietti set to direct a film about Batman called The Brave and the Bold. Not to mention there's tons more projects in the pipeline. Green Lantern and Amanda Waller are about to get their own HBO Max shows, Paradise Lost will serve as a Wonder Woman prequel, and even Swamp Thing's about to get his own movie. Clearly Gunn's moving full steam ahead, which might be the only way to help fans move on from the franchise's mediocre past. Look, the DCEU's obviously left a bad taste in our mouths, and The Flash was probably the worst ending it could have gotten, so I seriously doubt Warner Bros. Would want to dredge up the past anytime soon. They're more than happy to let James Gunn chart a new course, and a Flash sequel will ruin his plans to retcon the cinematic universe. For starters, the whole reboot concept's confusing enough as it is. Gunn doesn't need a hanger-on from the DCEU, which he clearly showed by firing Henry Cavill. If he couldn't make it, there's no chance Ezra will. Sure, Barry Allen's a core part of the DC canon, but Nobdoy wants to see Ezra Miller in the role. If they did, the movie would have made some money at the box office, right? Gunn's probably planning to bring The Flash in much later, giving audiences time to absorb the new saga, which means instead of a sequel, we'll get to see a new Flash movie in the future. So from it effectively ruining James Gunn's DCU reboot to the first film's troubled production history, this was why The Flash 2 will never happen.